Hey, what's up YouTube? In this video, I want to talk about the parts of our consciousness, of our cognition that are in play here when we're developing what I call mental body fluency. So to review, our goal is to upgrade our physical body fluency, that is the smoothness and evenness with which tension can flow through the soft tissue fibers and bones of our body. And our ability to do that is going to be based on our mental body fluency, which is our ability to intuitively navigate the body network, visualize all of its parts and pieces, and clear those blockages, connect those breakages so that we can upgrade the fluency of the network. That is what mental body fluency is. And to understand how we develop mental body fluency, you need to understand what the different parts of our consciousness are that are at play here. And particularly in this video, I want to look at sense, attention, imagination, and reason. So when I talk about sense, I'm talking about the process by which our sense organs of our eyes, our ears, the muscle spindles in our muscles, our skin and tactile receptors. We have all these receptors as on our body and in our body that allow us to perceive the world around us. And we're most familiar, of course, with visual perception, sight, auditory, and then as well as auditory, which is with our ear. What's less clear to us and what's very prominent in the body fluency system are things like tactile and specifically for us, kinesthetic, which deals with muscle contraction and how that combines to get a picture of where our body is in space. So these are our senses, and you can, sight and audition are quite clear. When it comes to things like tactility and kinesthesia, those things are a bit more vague because there's actually multiple pieces to it. They're kind of like an umbrella category. We won't go too deep into that, but that's what I mean by senses. Your senses are coming in from different inputs, and they all combine in our brain to create a picture of the world. And we then have attention. So most of what we're sensing is not showing up in the window of our consciousness because we're not paying attention to it. Right now you're paying attention to me speaking, hopefully, and therefore you're not paying attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, or if you're sitting down, the feeling of the chair on your butt. But maybe now you are because I pointed it out to your attention, right? Or maybe you'll notice how my hand is going like this right now. Or you might notice how there's a mirror right here. Now that I said it, you might notice it. So now I've pointed your attention to these visual objects. But you can also pay attention to maybe the sound of the air conditioning or the computer humming in your room or people speaking in the background or some other auditory object in your sensory environment. So let's look at sense versus attention. Sense, we're just bringing in these raw physical inputs from our environment, but most of us we're not even aware of because our awareness is dictated by where we're placing our attention. So attention is something that we have some degree of autonomy over. We can move it around. Some of us better than others. A lot of us have a lot of difficulty controlling our attention. The external environment will grab our attention against our will. So part of what we do here is training our attention. When I teach people language, this is where I develop all these skills. Learning how to learn a foreign language, I need to train my attention to notice all these subtle nuances and details of the sounds that people are making. Then I have to notice how their hands are moving, how their face is moving, notice all these different details to put it together as part of the process of learning how to communicate with people of another language. So that same raw ability to just break down the parts of my consciousness is what I applied to develop body fluency. So now that we know that we have attention, that we can voluntarily move through the different senses, next thing we can look at is imagination. So when I say imagination, you can contrast that with our present tense awareness. So I'm feeling the chair in my butt right now. I'm hearing the air conditioning in the background. These are all things that I'm experiencing right now, here and now. But if I wanted to, I can bring my attention away from the here and now and experience sounds and sights and physical sensations that I'm not actually experiencing in this here and now. Try it. I want you to think of some other place. Like you're probably not, maybe you're laying in bed, but imagine you're laying in a different bed, someone else's bed, or you're laying on the ground. If you're on the ground, imagine laying on the bed. If you're not laying on the bed, imagine laying on the ground, okay? And when I say imagine that, I want you to imagine the visual view of what it's like looking up at your ceiling, laying on your bed, or laying on the ground. Now, I want you to imagine hearing someone playing the trombone in the background. Right? You can probably imagine that. Without having any trombone there, you can conjure that into the auditory space of your imagination. Now I want you to imagine moving your arm up and waving it without actually moving your arm and waving it. If you just sit there and don't move your body, you can imagine yourself moving your arm and the sensation of what that would feel like. Which is pretty crazy when you think about it, that we can do that as humans. We can just kind of like conjure things out of thin air that way. But that's what we do. And that is what imagination is. We can be in our present moment senses, or we can kind of take our memory of what the world is like through our senses and then create another world in our mind and then start to navigate and experience and move through that world in a very, very powerful and robust way. So that's another key feature of mental fluency, and we'll get into that in a moment. But first, I also want to talk about space, and more specifically, the spatial relationships between objects. So if we place ourselves in a new scene here, imagine you are in the jungle, and in front of you, I want you to visualize a bunch of trees and stuff like that. Now I want you to imagine the sounds of like jungle noises, like monkeys, like all these kind of weird sounds or whatever. And then as you pay attention to these sounds, I want you to imagine that behind you, you hear the growl of a tiger, right? And now in front of you, imagine seeing a person, seeing their face going, huh, and then hearing them be like, oh God, right? And then I want you to notice in your imagination how you can actually create a spatial relationship in your imagination between hearing someone in front of you and hearing a tiger behind you. You can actually kind of create that experience of the spatial relationship between those things. And just the same way you can visualize this red flower over here and this green flower over here, you can visualize this sound over here and this sound over here. A spatial relationship that we're forming to create a 3D hologram of a reality. And also with our bodies, I want you to feel tension in your body right now. Just kind of maybe flex your calf muscle and like feel that tension there, and then flex your arm muscle somewhere here, feel that tension there. If you close your eyes and do it, and just kind of notice what is the spatial relationship between this arm and this leg. If I move around, it's a different relationship. Maybe I can put my arm in front of my leg or below my leg and create these different relationships. So as a very important key part here, we have all these different senses that are taking in completely different types of information. But when they come into our mind, they all get processed. And one big aspect of how they hang together is space, that we're able to put them all in a shared space and create a shared picture. That's very important. So now we have our sense, we have attention, we have imagination, and we have these relationships between things. The next thing I want to talk to you about are maps. Okay, so if I look here on this map of Bali, Indonesia, which happens to be where I am as I record this video, you can see this blue dot represents me, and all of these different lines here represent the streets and the different restaurants and places on those streets. So what am I looking at when I'm looking at a map? It's quite a remarkable technology if you think about it. Relatively new technology, because we never had bird's eye views of the world before, because no one could fly yet until past 100 years. And this, in the mathematics to actually figure out how to create a map like this is relatively new as well. But once we figured that math out and we started developing the first kind of bird's eye view maps of the world, it granted us a lot of power. Why? Because we were able to see these spatial relationships between places in geography. And then what that allowed me to do then is if I'm right here in this place right here, Outpost Ubud, and I want to go to Villa Sol over here, then I can say, okay, I'm going to come out here, come down this road, and then turn here. But check this out. What direction am I going to turn? If I came down this road, what direction am I going to turn? Some people have a really hard time answering these type of questions, but I'm sure a lot of you can answer correctly that you would make a right turn. How do you know it's a right turn? Because what you did in the moment to answer that question is you conjured into your imagination what it would be like to be on a road going this direction and entering an intersection. And then what you did is you translated what you saw here on this map, this kind of abstract diagram. You translated that to an experience you had in the real world, coming to an intersection and turning right. So notice how this kind of what they call integration occurs. So the way we understand the world and make sense of the world through our senses is we don't just rely on one sense or just one thing. We have this capacity to integrate our senses. It's called multimodal integration or multisensory integration if you're studying cognitive science. And that's very powerful because now if I see something, it might not actually be that, I might be hallucinating it. But if I see it and I hear it, way higher chance that it's real, right? Because that's two inputs and they're kind of synced up pretty well. But even better if I touch it. If I touch it, I see it, and I hear it, then really, really high chance that it's a real thing and not some hallucination that I'm having. So that's what sensory integration is about. And this is a key principle for how we develop our mental body fluency. Because what we do in body fluency is we take a map, exact same as a map here. This that you're looking at, this technology is a map of the human body, which you can navigate just as well as you can navigate here on your foot. But instead of navigating your feet, what you will learn how to navigate here in body fluency is navigate the kinesthetic sense. So each of these red and blue things represent the insertion of muscles into the bones. So for example, I can, what do I play with here? This is where the pectoralis major tree inserts into the sternum and manubrium and collarbone and rib cage and into our humerus bone, right? So these different branches of this tree here are muscle tissue fibers, and inside these muscle tissue fibers, we have sense organs known as muscle spindles, which tell us when this muscle is contracted. It tells us other things about it as well, like the speed of contraction and other kind of stuff. Anyways, all those sense organs, they send things back to our nervous system and let us know that something's happening in this area. And we don't just feel a sensation of the pec, but we feel it in relationship to the rest of our body. So, for example, if I put on this brachialis right here, you probably don't have an awareness of this muscle, but if you do a program, you can develop it quite quickly. And you can develop an awareness of this muscle here known as the brachialis. And this is a similar type, same type of sensation, like a muscle contraction sensation I have here, but it's spatially in a different place. So I can feel this and feel this and feel the relationship between those two. And then I can finally do something called reasoning, spatial reasoning. If I'm trying to, for example, upgrade my network and I discover and feel that there should be a chain here because this pec tree and this brachialis have a shared node in the humerus. So I should have a chain here. But a lot of people, that chain will be broken, right? Similar to a street that's closed down, like a blocked off intersection, whatever it is. So I want to connect this. I won't go into the technique of actually joining two muscles together, but just for the sake of understanding what's going on here, I'm using my kinesthetic sense to feel this and feel this, using my sense of spatial kinesthetic sense, but these things are so complex and if I only use the spatial, I might get confused. But if I combine and integrate my kinesthetic attention with this visual image here enough times, then I can integrate this map into my cognition, into my mental image. So you can try that right now. Just take a look at this picture of this, these two intersections right here, Museum Pendant, Swasti Eco, these two things. And then if I take it away, close your eyes and bring it back to your mind. And it's there. So if it was in there and it was a high fidelity image, you can still do the process of navigating on this map, except now the map is in your head, right? And you can probably, I'm sure a lot of you, maybe not all of you, can conjure to mind the map of your hometown, bring it to your head as well, or whatever place on the earth that you have the most awareness of because of a Google map. Just bring that to your mind and you can navigate that and kind of solve problems with that map. That is what I've learned to do with this map right here. It's a complex map, but we have the capacity to integrate our visual sense and our kinesthetic sense into our imagination and do that. It's a very, very powerful mind we have that we can do that. And it's such a useful thing to do because if we can do this, then we can what? Visualize our body network, kinesthetically navigate through it with our movements and these different tensions that we're creating and distributing. And then with that ability, finally upgrade our network, feel the blockages, feel the breakages, clear the blockages, connect those broken chains, upgrade the fluency. And this is all possible because of our ability to very precisely and very carefully move attention through our senses, through our imagined spatial pictures of our senses, and then regulate that back and integrate that back to the here and now with our bodies and start making changes. Okay, so I hope that was a interesting video for you. Again, we covered the aspects of mental body fluency, or the parts of our consciousness involved, and that is our senses, our attention, which can move through our senses, our imagination, which can reproduce our senses and our attention in a space that's not actually here and now, but in our heads exclusively. And then we can reason through that space to navigate from one restaurant to another, navigate from one bone to another, and ultimately resolve problems that we have within our own network. Okay, so that's what I got for you today. If you like that video, like and subscribe, leave a comment, and check us out at bodyfluency.net.